So, an earlier class, in the last class, we were discussing about how to communicate between parent and child, right? And we were explaining different ways of doing communication between different components. So, anyways, do you have any questions from the previous class? Did you get a chance to look at the assignment, or?
No one wish actually.
Okay.
We'll do it.
Anyways, sorry, go ahead.
I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay, cool. So today's class, we would be going through a different thing altogether. So every Angular, whenever, how can I explain this better? Do you know anything about life cycle events, or how that works, or anything about life cycle?
Life cycle of?
Life cycle in a regular, web page or anything. Did you hear anything about it before? So every particular
Creating
programming, yep. Every particular program or a web application has a life cycle. Life cycle is something with it goes through different phases. So whenever the component is initially created, okay, it actually goes through constructor if it has one. Right now, in this component, you don't see any constructor, but usually if you have a constructor, this is the first thing it would actually come to. And depending on whatever changes we have within this component, it would make more changes. So basically what I'm trying to say is, depending on our situation, there are different things which would actually go through. I'll explain again what it means. So when we initially start the Angular application, whenever it's trying to create a component, right, it would first initially come to the constructor. And right now, I don't have any other lifecycle event, but sometimes you see this one has an on init, right? It says server element component implements on init. So on init actually runs whenever the component is initialized. So it would always come to the constructor first. After that, it would come to ng on init. I'll explain what it actually means. So for example, we have this component, and if you remember, we had something console.log before we have discussed, where I can simply print something on the web browser. So let me open our. So this is what I have here, and I'm saying let me also open our console. Whatever we try to print here, it would actually show in here, right? So I'll simply say this is the constructor, or I'm calling from constructor. Okay, and also I have a ng on it. I would simply say console.log, and I would simply say I'm from ng on init. So depending on how or when this gets called, right? When does the constructor get called, or whenever the ng inits get called, we can simply see these statements, right? I'm calling from constructor, or I'm calling from ng unit printed here. And you can see once we have saved the program, you can see it is calling from the constructor. It gets to that first, then it gets to the ng on init. You might be wondering why do we even need to bother about lifecycle events? Depending on for example, let me give you another lifecycle event. It may be clear. So we do have something called do check. Okay. And whenever you want to implement one of the lifecycle events, okay, there are plenty of life cycle events, as I mentioned before. Would always start with ng on it, not ng on it, but constructor. It always goes to the constructor first. Constructor is similar to main. Whenever you write programs, it would always go to main, right? Main is the first thing it would actually start with. Constructor is similar in Angular. So after that, as I mentioned, it would go to on ng on init. Actually, okay. So, and ng on init is when the component is initialized. So basically, whenever the entire component loads, that is when it hits the ng on init. And you can also see that is where it's called. So it's always, when I'm printing here, you see it's printed the first one, right? You have a question?
Is ng on, sorry, on init is an interface, right?
Yep, it's an interface.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to implement that. And yeah, you have to actually call it whenever, you know, implementing one of these lifecycle events. So since, yeah, it's an interface, I have to call that, and I also have to implement that method here. So it's on it and ng on it. Okay. And all of the lifecycle events are similar. So there is also called do check. It is what it simply says. It always checks whenever there is a change. Any change, not any change you have, it would always go to the do check whenever there is a change. So also you might be thinking like, what changes does it consider, right? So mostly event-based changes. For example, if I have a button and if I would click on that, right, or whenever someone is calling our current page, those are the instances where it would actually go through that do check. But anyways, in order to do that again, I have to make a call to that. I would simply say do check. And I also have to include that in the Angular code because that is where it is. And you can also see that it's complaining that I haven't implemented. So I can simply click on this implement interface, and it would implement that ng do check. And you can see when does this actually call that. So this is whenever any event-based changes happen, it calls this. So it says, let's say I'm from do check. And I have that, and I also have dev tools. So you see, it's calling the constructor first, right? Then ng on init, and after that, it's going to the check operation, do check. And if I say hit add server, right now it's complaining it something is missing, but if you ignore that, see, it does that. And for every click of a button, see, whenever I'm entering text as well, right, it is doing that. So any change you have in the component or you see it simply prints that. Any questions about this do check? So any changes you have, not okay. No matter what changes you have here, do check always happens. And this is Angular thing again. Okay. So apart from these two or these two lifecycle events, there is also ng on change. Do check is absolutely everything. I think on changes or I have to, where is this complaining? That's fine. Again, basically, if you want to see how, whenever, if you want to see how these are called, or if you want to understand more about these events, the simple thing would be just console log it. You would have an understanding when it is called. So that is what I'm doing here as well. On change, right? And this is an important or really useful thing using console.log. This way I would actually know if I have a variable change or if something changes, or if I want to debug something, I can always simply say console.log and it would automatically show me whatever changes are made. And you can see right now I'm only sending a string, right? I don't always have to send a string. I can also send any object. So for example, whenever as soon as I implemented this ng on changes, right, from here, you see it's also saying changes, simple changes. So what is happening here? If I want to know what are the changes happening here, I can simply say console.log and I want to know about all the changes. So I will simply say changes. And that is what it shows. So it prints almost everything, not just a string, but any sort of object. So I have this and I observe here. Okay. The first thing it did is I'm calling from constructor. And you can see even before ng on in it, it's calling ng change. And it's also printing what changes I have. For example, in this case, in our case, I'm getting these values, right? Whatever input values I'm getting. It says input element. These are the changes happening. I'm getting just a test and all of these. And that is because I'm trying to call this component, right, from the app component.html. Since I'm calling that and I'm trying to pass values from here, that is what it's trying to do. And it says whatever values have changed in here. Okay. There are a lot of lifecycle events in Angular. The best way of understanding, in case if you, and I'm explaining it to you now, but since we have plenty of them, you may or may not remember. The best way of understanding what is going on is just using, again, console.log, or you can also put some breakpoints in your system, right? Where you can go back to, right? This is where I've implemented those. And all I have to do is put some breakpoints down here. I would actually know how the flow is. So let me refresh this page. And you can see it hit this constructor breakpoint first. Then if I continue, you see it goes to ng on changes. And you can also see whatever changes you have by just hovering over it, and you can see all the current values in here. So the simple changes is not just whatever changes on this element, but also whatever the external element tries to push in here. So in our case, it's trying to get this input right from app component.html. It's calling the app server element. And so it's initializing this value first, whatever values I'm getting from that app component HTML. After that, it's actually going to ng on init. Only after that, it's to do check. But if you put a breakpoint here, you can see that it constantly happens. So any change I make, I can say A, and you see it goes to do check. So all, even when I try to click in this, it's doing that, right? It's going to that particular. Also, if you want to have it understand it simpler way, you can. I don't need to have breakpoints, but I also have console.log. But anyways, coming back to our example again. So any questions about any of those methods or lifecycle events? Okay. So apart from these, okay, I have ng on changes, ng do check, ng init. There are a few others, and these are as of now. You have seen all of these. Okay, let me explain a few more. I have init changes do check. Another one I have is ng after content init. So this one is more gets called ng after content init gets called if see, let's say I have a parent component right down here. The app component is the parent component, and test server and just a test. Whatever we have here, this is a child component. After content init or ng content init is more related to whenever the parent tries to make any changes to our component. So any changes which are made from the parent to our component, that is when this gets called after content init. And it's in, so that is when it gets called. Is that clear? Is that?
Yes, Anvesh.
Okay. So this is just content init, and there is also content checked. So content init is whenever it's initialized, and content check is whenever you have a change, similar to on init and on changes. So, or you can also refer to check. So this is similar to on init and do check, but just these are the changes which are transferred from the parent component. So whenever the parent tries to do something to a child component, that is when those are called. Let me implement that interface. And component. Okay. again, to see the changes or when to see when it's called, I would simply use console.log, and I would say this is content. And okay, have that. And so the first thing it's doing is constructor on change, on check, do check, and this is from content init. Again, where did I say content? Okay, so it would call content init, content check. So whenever these are initialized again from the parent component, if I make any changes to that particular component. Let's see. Right now, this code isn't working that great, but server 1, content 1. Looks like I have some bugs. I have to. But you can see, whenever I try to change something from the parent or change something from the parent to here, that is when the content checked. You know, let's say this is from parent. So that is why whenever I'm trying to change something in the parent, that is when it's getting called. Like this is only this thing is from our server component element from our current component, but rest of it is from the parent. So that is why whenever I'm trying to click a button, which is in the parent, that is what it's trying to do. Because after content init or after content checked is from the parent. Okay, and I have so far on init. Most of the times you would either depending on your situation, it may change, but I've actually used on changes frequently at my work, and on init is always present, right? Most of the times it's already implemented. So whenever I try to create a component, it's already implemented. For example, let me show you. So I have this here, let's say the source. Okay, source and ngGC. If I'm trying to create a component, let's say servers. You see, it always comes with the constructor and also ng on it by default. This is already implemented. So most of the times you would see this one, ng on in it, also the constructor. Okay. And finally, so far I've explained you on init is whenever the component is initialized or whenever you see component is created. Initialized is nothing but created. So whenever this is created, that is when on init is called. Constructor is called even before that. And the order of events is important if you want to implement any of these lifecycle events. Constructor, on changes, on init, right? And do checks. And depending on if anything changes in the parent, either one of these gets called. This is when the parent initializes our component. This is whenever there are any changes, the parent tries to push to our component. Okay. After all this, there is also after view init and after view checked. So again, the name itself clearly says whenever the view is nothing but our HTML page, whenever that is initialized, this gets called, and after view checked. So whenever there is a change in our view, this gets called. So again, and also implement that. And calling from so what programming languages did you learn before? If you already know about interfaces, looks like you know quite a bit of programming. So what did you learn before?
Is
Sorry.
it what Anvesh?
I'm just asking what programming languages did you learn before? Did you?
Java.
Oh, okay.
C, little Python. That's it.
Oh, Python as well. Okay, cool. Yeah, Python is a current trend. There are plenty of jobs in Python. If I mean, if you want to be like a full stack, you can say Angular on the front end and Python on the back end. That would
Okay.
be a good combination.
Okay.
I haven't learned Python. I've been working on C# mostly, but Python is.
I started learning Python in Edureka.
Oh, in Edureka. Okay.
Yeah, but I stopped in the middle because I
Okay.
can't kid and I can't
Okay.
work now, so stopped for a while.
Okay. Yeah, but yeah, Python. If you can continue in Python, then it's a really good one.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, coming back to view checked and view init. So this is after the view is initialized or whenever there are any changes in the view, and we can see that here as well. So constructor on change on init do check view init and view checked. So this is the order. And whenever we make any changes to view, again, it calls us view check. And finally, we have one more thing. It's called, so whenever we have initialization, right? Whenever we are trying to create something, we can also destroy it, right? So let's call it on destroy. And let us add that and also implement our interface. So that's right. So console.log, and I'm saying this is the end of the component. So in app component HTML, you see we are trying to create here, right? We can also destroy it. Let me create another button here. Beauty and danger. Say destroy component server, right? And also let me do a click and simply call it destroying server, and let us pass $event and destroying server. It's any, and in here we're trying to push to server elements, right? And that is what is getting passed to here, to server elements. So instead of doing that, let us remove that. So we can simply say just start server element start or not pop to have clear. Nope. Okay, anyways, if I'm making this empty string, can I do that? Nope. Okay. When I say push, it's trying to create that, right? Whenever I say pop, it tries to remove the last one. So if I say destroy server, it deleted that, right? Because I'm clearing that here. Apart from that, we can also see that it says this is the end of the component. Initially, it wouldn't have that. Whenever it's initializing, you don't see that event here. It doesn't say it destroys. If you say look at it, this is from parent check, view when it checked. It doesn't have, you know, no, I'm not looking at the right one. This one. Says this is the end of the component, right? This is whenever this component gets destroyed or cleared. So whenever I'm trying to clear this component, whenever I'm doing that, it calls that this is the end of the component. So that is a life cycle. So if you have any questions again, important thing is if you want to understand how it flows, you can always use the console.log and simply say I'm calling from so-and-so, and it will just show it in the console.log. And constructor on change and on init and the rest of those. These two are from the parent. These are after it's initialized. And this is whenever anything changes in the HTML page. And this is when the page gets destroyed or the component gets deleted in simple terms. So any questions about any of these events?
So for every parent component create, for every parent component, we have to implement all these child components.
No, we don't have to actually do any of these. We don't have to implement any of these methods. I mean by default, sorry, go ahead.
Like you said, right, life cycle, no?
Mm-hmm.
So for every life cycle process, does it continues the whole process?
Yep, for every life cycle, it goes through these phases. But depending on our situation, we can either implement that interface and write the method, or we don't have to. Only when we need it. But these are, it's simply like a button click, right? So only when I click on this, something happens, right? Similar to that, only when I implement the interface or that is when it actually gets called. It goes on, but it depends on either we want to use it or not. So
Okay.
So,
It's
for
based,
example, for a button, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, based on our requirement,
Mm-hmm.
we have to use those child components, right? The life cycle.
Life cycle, yeah. I can also have all of those in the app component.ts as well. Right now it doesn't, but I can simply say implements and I can say on in it and I have just implement that. It doesn't have to, but if I want to, so for example, uh, let me go back to, why do I have so many things? Okay, for example, I want to know whenever something changes, right? So in that case, I would implement this, right? I would implement that, and I also would create this method. So whenever I want to know some changes, whatever changes is happening in our component, then I would do this one. If not, otherwise, so far it works just fine without using any of these ones. Again, if I want to know when this component gets destroyed, I want to do something. So only then I would use on destroy. Again, others the same thing for others as well. Yeah. So today's class, again, as I mentioned yesterday, would be short, and this is where I would stop. These are different life cycle events, and I would encourage you to start doing the assignments.
Okay.
Yep. Let me briefly explain. This is what we have done so far. There are a few more things. One of them is routing. We can create forms, okay? And in forms, again, these are the things I want to discuss in the future classes. And I think we have like 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks worth of classes. So after that, you should be good with Angular. So it's good that you have come so far. But anyways, so for Angular, these are the things left. One of the important things would be using forms, and for forms, again, there are Angular components. So far, you've only seen, we have only used what you call HTML tags, right, mostly. There are also, not Angular, but material components, okay? You would see how it is different. It's not much different from whatever HTML tags that we are using, but it makes them look better. Anyways, and another thing is routing, observables. You probably, sorry, I think you already know what dependency injection, right? Do you have any idea about this dependency injection? Or, sorry?
I think I have to go through it once.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying. So we haven't discussed, but these are future topics. So observables and services, dependency injection, routing, and making HTTP request, and authentication. So once, yeah, only few more topics left. So we would be going through, there's one more topic, I'm forgetting what it is, but we have one topic, and after that we would go through all of these. And this is another month of classes, but I would say if you practice assignments or do the assignments, then things would make clear and you wouldn't forget any of these. Anyways,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, sure, Anvesh. We'll do a start assignment.
Okay, cool. So, anyways, I'll stop the class here. You have a good one. Good night. Bye.
Bye, Anvesh. Bye.